Today, we want to talk a little bit about how we understand the world of deviance and violence, especially how it pertains to sports. The purpose for this particular class is that we're trying to move past simply describing deviant or violent behavior. It's not terribly analytical, and we want to have a little bit more emphasis for understanding how and why these things keep occurring. When you think about the journalistic questions, who, where, when, those types of things, it's the how question that's really important to us. The how question is important because if we have an eye on trying to contain or prevent deviant behavior within this institution, we want to understand how is it that this happens in one instance and how deviant behavior keeps happening over and over and over again. In order to understand the how question, we want to follow some sort of basic social scientific method. And this is going to happen by emphasizing theories, which are just basically explanations for things, case studies, and then trying to develop potential solutions by looking at specific problems within the institution of sport, recreation, and physical activity. Understanding a particular incident of deviant behavior is only one aspect of the entire process. Essentially, if we're trying to eliminate all deviance within the realm of sport, it's going to be very difficult to do, but that's a worthy goal to shoot for. To eliminate deviant behavior, we have to try to contain deviant behavior, hopefully prevent deviant behavior. But before you can do all of that, you have to understand how is it that it's occurred year after year after year. One way to study sports in society is to fall back on social science. For this particular course, we're going to primarily draw from the idea of sociology. The discipline of sociology is a great tool for studying sports because it helps us understand dynamics and then the groups that help to engage in these dynamics. Sociology was developed hundreds of years ago, about 200 years ago or so, and it already has established concepts and theories. Additionally, it already has social scientific research methods. So at this point, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can rely on what's already been tested and what already works. These tools help to enable us to see how behavior is connected with all the different things in society. Whether you're talking about individual social life, economic structures, politics, for example, or even the historical record in which we're living. Sport is simply one institution that's associated with deviant or violent behavior. It's the focus of the course. We could very easily have a class that deals with deviant or violent behavior in the world of business, or in the institution of marriage and family, or government, etc., etc. This class is about sports, which is why we focus on that one institution. In order to help us better see and understand what's going on in the world of sport, Wright Mills created this concept that's very simple, and he called it the sociological imagination. And he simply said, the sociological imagination is when a person understands the intersection of their own history and their own biography. Now, what does that mean? It means we're trying to understand our personal or micro-level experiences and how they're associated with these large things that are happening on the societal level, the macro level. So we have our own personal problems. Well, how do those personal problems reflect or contradict some of the things that are happening at the larger level in society? The example we usually give is going back to the XFL. And for many students that are younger, they may not remember the XFL. As someone who is older, I do remember the XFL and the very, very unique circumstances. There's also a very nice ESPN 30 for 30 documentary on the rise and the fall of the XFL. But I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea of sport, recreation, and physical activity and unemployment. What you see over here to the right of the screen is a very prominent player in the XFL. Well, in the XFL, you didn't have to put your name on the back of your jersey. You were able to put whatever nickname or catchphrase or motivational phrase on the back of your jersey, and that was one of the ways that they were bucking the trend against the NFL or the National Football League. So in this particular player was known as He Hate Me, and he said that was what motivated him to play. Well, inevitably, so you have your personal things that happen, your personal story that happens in the world of professional football. There were a lot of really good players in the XFL, but eventually the XFL went out of business and it shut down. And those players and those coaches and the staff for those particular franchises, they were all unemployed. Now, the unemployment is a very famous example of C. Wright Mills in the Sociological Imagination. For a very long time, a lot of people thought if you became unemployed, it's because you were a bad employee and you did not have the required skills to be productive. And so therefore, being unemployed or laid off was a byproduct of you being a bad person or a bad employee. As we know, many times that is not the case. There are larger economic or public issues that are at work. And those larger economic issues may cause the shutdown of a particular organization, or in this case, a sports league. Now, this particular individual, He Hate Me, actually went on to a career in the NFL where he was with the Philadelphia Eagles and a few other franchises. He had the talent to participate and be involved in the NFL. But when the XFL shut down, he was technically unemployed. And so that's a great example of a personal problem, something that happened uniquely to him, being the result of some sort of larger economic issue. Another way of viewing sports in a particular society is this phrase, the microcosm of society. So sports tend to mirror what's going on in the larger social environment, right? So the traditional assumption here in the United States is that being involved in sports is a positive thing. In fact, in the early to mid-1970s, Dr. Harry Edwards came up with this idea that was called the dominant American sport creed. And what he simply identified and articulated was that from a national point of view, from a cultural point of view, sport provides discipline, competition, mental and physical fitness, it builds character, and there was a sense of religiosity and nationalism. The nationalism obviously is reflected in national pride that's associated with things like the U.S. men's or women's national team in whatever sport, Olympic competition, those types of things. And he said sport heroes, quote unquote, oftentimes embody or reflect these very positive characteristics. Okay, and that's a great way for articulating how we view sports. Now, I do pose the question, and it's rhetorical, we don't necessarily need to answer at this moment, but does sport promote any negative values? And this question is important because this class is focused on deviant and violent behavior. Where does it come from? How is it that it manifests itself year after year after year on all levels of sport? And so we know that sport has a positive association in American culture, and the rest of this class is going to be looking at and trying to understand the beginning or the origins of negative or deviant behavior within the realm of sports. I love to talk about theories because they get very complicated, and oftentimes students have a bad association with theories. But theories are very simple things. They can be described or defined in one or two words. Theories explain or describe something. That is it. They can get much more complicated than that, but at their core, theories are just explanations. These explanations are often based on or associated with this idea of causality. So if you look at the example at the bottom of the slide, you'll see this is kind of an example of causality and how one phenomenon usually precedes another, and the result is what we look at. So, for example, in the very, very physical game of ice hockey, right? It's also a very intense and an emotional game. Those two things together sometimes manifest themselves in the fighting that the casual fan often sees as prevalent in the game of hockey. Now, we know that fighting in hockey may or may not actually be more prevalent in that sport as compared to other sports, but the societal perception is that it is more involved in the game. So, we want to try to understand that, and that sets a great stage or foundation for us because we'll start to look at something as negative as fighting may or not be seen as positive or negative depending on the context, the sport that we're looking at. So we want to understand kind of how society, sport, and deviant behavior start to initially relate together. Social theories are a great place to start. We won't use these theories very often because we're going to use them as foundational elements, the foundation for building a house or a pyramid or whatever sort of structure that works well in your mind. But as we said before, sociology has been around for over 200 years. And so we want to use the insight that's been developed over those past couple of hundred years. There are three very important theories, historically speaking, from the discipline of sociology: structural functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. And we're going to briefly talk about each one. Structural functionalism, sometimes noted or called functionalism, is a theory that focuses on large things in society. So that's what we mean when we say it's a macro level theory. So you might be talking about sport participation rates as compared to the individuals that participate in sport. That's an example of a macro level theory. And basically what functionalism says is that society is composed of all of these structures or these things that work together. All right? So if you're talking about the institution of sport, or if you're talking about the institution of education, or the institution of marriage and the family, government, etc., etc. Functionalism also says that deviant behavior is basically the result of not integrating within this entire holistic unit. So that means people essentially didn't get the message, quote unquote, and that's why they're engaging in deviant behavior. Well, this is very important for us because sport, then, is a great way for people to learn what it means to be an American, for example. And that's what socialization is, learning the norms and values of a particular cultural group. Right? And once you learn what it means to work hard, right? Cooperation. These are some of the things that you learn theoretically in sport. And that helps you to integrate with your peers, helps you to integrate in the school system, also helps you to integrate once you maybe go through high school, maybe go through college or trade school, and you finally get into your job. Well, once you start integrating with your job, the idea, as it goes from this particular point of view, is that you learned a lot of those values from participating in society. Sport is one place, not the only place, but one place where you can learn how to be integrated into a society. Additionally, sport also provides character building in that we learn right and wrong, we learn sportsmanship, we learn cooperation, we learn authority, so the athletes have to listen to their coaches, those types of things. And it says, okay, deviant behavior within this institution of sports. That results from a breakdown in this inhibitive function of sport. So if sport is supposed to be teaching us different things, and then some of the individuals that are associated with sport, whether they're fans or coaches or athletes, if they engage in deviant or negative behavior, it's because there's something wrong with the function of sport. So how do we address that? One thing that a lot of people have put forth recently is this idea, and when I say recently, I'm talking about the last 15, 20 years, is mandated coaching education programs, where coaches, whether it's the youth sport level, middle school, high school, college, if you're talking about AAU and basketball or some of those ancillary aspects of youth sports that tend to be a little bit more organized and competitive, the idea is that if you train those coaches to be proper coaches, you train them in player development and holistic development. So player development is focused more on this idea of the X's and the O's of a sport. So you learn how to properly shoot a jump shot in basketball, or if you're going to be an offensive lineman in football, or if you're going to be a goalie in soccer, you're going to learn the sport-specific traits and mechanistic aspects of that sport to be successful. That's player development. Holistic development is what do you learn from being involved in sports. You learn how to be a part of a team. You learn how to put your ego in your back pocket. You learn how to, if you have some sort of failure, able to overcome that failure, the resiliency. Okay, so this is what we're talking about from a functionalist point of view in regards to understanding deviant behavior within this institution of sport, recreation, and physical activity. Converse, and sort of in the opposite of functionalism, is conflict theory. And it's a macro level theory as well. But it focuses more on economics and power, how it's distributed within society, and then as a result within the institution of sports. And it says deviance is, quote unquote, defined as wrong by those people that are in a position of power. Okay, that's interesting because that means, coming from kind of a sociology of deviance, a criminology, or criminal justice point of view, what makes a law? Right? It's not just this idea of right and wrong, but it's this idea of right and wrong that's been agreed upon by a society, and it's been codified into some sort of law or statute, and so therefore it's been defined to be wrong. Right? And so if you're looking from a conflict theory point of view or orientation, sports deviance is going to oftentimes be the result of people in power that define certain things or certain acts as deviance. Okay? And a great example here, and we don't need to get into a political discussion, but just kind of think about this, was recently in the NFL they had very strict celebration rules. In 2017 and 2018, they actually loosened those rules because of the public outcry, right? Those people that were in charge in the NFL defined celebrating as negative up until 2017, 2018. The NCAA, looking at athletes, amateurism, some people have charged the NCAA or certain college athletic programs with exploitation, those types of things. The idea is that who's in charge of the NCAA? It's not the student athletes that you see on TV, and oftentimes it's not some of the middle management or the day-to-day administrators within the athletic department. The definitions of what is amateurism, what is right, what's permissible, what is wrong, all those different types of things comes from those people in charge of the NCAA. Switching gears dramatically here is symbolic interactionism. It looks at things from the complete opposite level. It's from the micro level. So it's going to be really concerned with this idea of how individuals interact, experience, and understand society, culture, and the world of sports. It says society is created and maintained through social interaction, which makes total sense, right? It tends to focus on the identity of people and their personal experiences. This idea of a symbol is very important. And this, to me, anyway, is the greatest definition in all of social science. A symbol is something that stands for something else. And it's so commonsensical, it's so simplistic, but in the end, it's very powerful. You know, a lot of people talk about they buy merchandise of their favorite team. Why do they do that? Why do they spend so much money to buy hats and t-shirts and sweatshirts and pants and banners? And why do you deck out your quote-unquote man cave to represent your favorite basketball or NFL franchise or something like that? It's because the way that we relate to society, the way that we think about ourselves, symbols are a great way of conveying that. George Herbert Mead, who was a very, very famous, he was actually a psychologist that really was involved in developing symbolic interactionism, which is a sociological theory, but oftentimes he used sport examples. And Herbert Blumer, whom we will talk about later in the semester, and he was very important to developing labeling theory and symbolic interactionism, as we know, actually played professional football for the Chicago Bears. But symbolic interactionism is interesting because the entire theory can be summed up with three basic assumptions. Number one, we respond to things in our social environment based on the meanings or the understanding of the meanings that these things have. Right? So if you look at a piece of fake grass that is painted with a large blue star, okay, there's nothing inherently good or bad about that star. All right, and that goes to our second point. Meanings are not inherent but social constructions. The people that are fans of the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, that large blue star on that fake grass down in Dallas on their home field means something. It's very emblematic and symbolic of who they are, the team that they love, and all the emotional energy that they've put into this particular franchise over the many, perhaps decades. Okay? Finally, number 3, shared meanings are always changing. Is punching someone in the face wrong? On the surface, yes, it appears to be wrong. But if you're in the sport of boxing or mixed martial arts, then punching someone in the face is not necessarily wrong. It is part and parcel to that particular sport. So the act of striking another human being in the face with some appendage from your body can be defined as normal or abnormal depending upon the social environment. And that's really unique. And that's what I love about these social theories. They really tell us a lot about people. If you were to tell people, hey, it's in August and it's piping hot here in the state of Kansas, and you're going to go sit in a dark asphalt parking lot for 4 hours before a college football game, and you're going to grill out and you're going to put on the jersey of your favorite team and paint your face and all that kind of stuff, someone who doesn't understand sports, someone who maybe is not even from this planet, if you will, is going to come down and say, that seems kind of odd. But for those people tailgating in that moment, it's an amazing experience that is part of a community and a constructed reality that's very important to them. I've been to a lot of sporting events and a lot of fans who are engaging in behavior that's quote-unquote supporting the team, but outside the realm of sport might seem a little off, kind of crazy, kind of abnormal, dare I say, kind of deviant. So now, understanding deviance from these particular social theories really helps us to see that what constitutes good and bad, moral, immoral, or amoral, violent, non-violent, or deviant and abnormal, whatever constitutes those things, changes based upon many different environments. And what I really love about looking at deviance or understanding criminology is that these things tend to be used and applied in real-world settings all the time. Karl Marx called it praxis, or it's the amalgamation of practical understanding and theoretical understanding to make a very, very appropriate decision. That's what we're going to hopefully do, is that we're going to apply different theories throughout understanding of sport, recreation, and physical activity. How we view things in this particular class is going to be a little bit different because of the unique emotional behaviors and trends of sport. Fandom is very unique. If you talk about people that are very into Apple products, for example, and this sort of emotion that was caught up in the release of different iPhones and stuff like that, that's sort of similar to what we're talking about. All right, because fans of something, a product or a service, whatever, they once emotion gets sort of riled up, and emotion is part of the identity process. Well, now we're talking about very complicated social and individual feelings and trends, and we need a way of understanding that, and that's all these particular theories are helping us to do. Now, I do think it's very important as we move forward. We're going to talk a lot about this idea of deviant behavior, and the reason I do that is because deviance and crime are not synonyms, right? If you look at kind of a loose working man's definition of a crime, it's an act that's prohibited by a law or sanction or something like that. But for it to be a criminal, then it needs to be enforced. That idea needs to be enforced by some sort of political entity, such as that's going to be associated with the either government or the polity, is what we call it. Now, a lot of people say, well, NCAAs and bylaws, that's kind of this. That's going to be associated more with deviance because the NCAA is not a political entity. It has bylaws, so it has rules, but it's not involved in criminal activity necessarily. That's why we like to talk about deviant behavior. And this is behavior that a large number of people are going to view as abnormal. Okay, the behavior is reactionary. It's not necessarily inherent to whatever it is that's going on. And this idea of what is abnormal is going to change over time based upon where you're living or who you're interacting with, what types of communities. And all that does is that points to deviance as what we call a social construction. Just like I was talking about earlier. Is punching someone in the face bad? On the surface, yes. But if it's part of the MMA, then that's not necessarily deviant in the realm of that particular contest. And that's why we like to talk about deviance more than crime. Crime, most of the time, by this very definition, is going to be deviant. Whereas deviance is much more, it's a larger term that encompasses things that may not be criminal. All right, so if you start to think about norms, things that we kind of understand and know just by being a part of society, that if you violate one of those social norms, that's what deviant behavior is about. Whereas crime is involving an action that's prohibited by a law or sanction and then is going to be enforced by some sort of entity. Finally, when we start thinking about, okay, there's a lot of different explanations for understanding deviant behavior. Well, these explanations tend to be based on a couple different things, a couple different factors. One is the social context of the action, and we'll get more to that later on in this semester. And secondly, we want to look at and use organized, previously tested theories. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to look at ideas that are used to explain and describe deviant behavior that have already been developed. We grab them from the buffet and we put them on our plate and we use them to satisfy whatever it is that we're going to be doing at that time. Now, there's a scholar named Donald Shoemaker, and over the years, whether it's 2004 or then the recent updates of some of his work, he basically typologizes or puts Sociology of Deviance Theories into a couple of different categories. Traditional, so these are the traditional or historical explanations for us understanding deviant behavior, and we'll talk about that one soon. There are the structural ones. These structural explanations are going to be much like functionalism or conflict theory, where they focus on larger aspects of deviant behavior. And you're going to be looking at things from a larger macro level. And then finally, constructionist theories, which are very similar to symbolic interactionism in that they work on a much more of a micro level. They involve the individual and this idea of culture and emotion, all those different things working together.